Hey, welcome to another episode of Eric's Camping Adventures. Today we're going to talk about a hike in Rocky Mountain National Park up to the Boulder, Brook group campsite. And in it we're going to talk about my plan for my next hike in the Red River Gorge. And we're going to talk about how to plan a trip with other people and how to hike as a group. Oftentimes you will encounter different skill levels, different ability levels, different knowledge levels, and it's important as a group when you start out on that hike that some of these differences will become more apparent, especially as the hike becomes more challenging. So it's important to be able to hike with a group and be able to have some of the skills that go along with that. It's more than the right equipment. It's more about being able to respect each other's differences, and even to the point to be able to pause and enjoy the journey of being with other people, being with their weaknesses and with their strengths, and be able to not only respect that, instead of treating your group hike like survival of the fittest. That's not a very good social strategy to get along with people. It probably has little or nothing to do with how you're going to get along with your hiking group. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because when we do this hike in the Red River Gorge, I'm going to be hiking with my nephew who has type 1 diabetes. Got some new equipment. They've got all the right packs. So in this one we're going to talk a little bit about how to hike with a group and respect each other's ability level in a healthy way. But if I go on an overnight trip, I use a little bigger backpack, and one of my favorites is my Canyon 2100. Found it on Amazon. It was I think $79. I think it weighs like 4 pounds. It's got some good pockets on it. It's got a top pocket. It's got a bunch of side pockets here. You stick some things in, some little mesh pockets on the side for water or tools. Lots of places to hook things. And then a front pocket. Also, inside you have a little bit of a zip pocket. It opens up, and you can put a full sleeping bag in the bottom there. Then it has a kind of the inside there. You can look all the way through that thing, or you can zip out the bottom to keep things separate. I always zip out the bottom because it allows for kind of better packing. You can stuff a little bit more in there. It is a small pack. It's called the 2100 because it's 2100 cubic inches. And it's worked for me. I think probably I could actually use something just a little bit bigger, but I have just stayed with this. Again, it's relatively inexpensive on Amazon, and I'd discourage you from, if you're just getting into backpacking or hiking or day hiking, from spending a ton of money on equipment, because number one, what if you don't like it and you spend all that money and then you have all this equipment laying around? Number two, it really doesn't take a ton of money to get into backpacking to have a decent set of equipment to do what you want to do. You do not have to spend the best. You do not have to follow the recommendations of everyone who comes along and says you need this, or you need to spend this much money to be cool. I would walk away from that real quick. It's just not the case. Compare the weights. This is again a 4-pound pack. You don't have to have the most expensive stuff. Sometimes I err on the side of being maybe a little too cheap. It's never actually harmed me in any way. I'm still here, but I've actually experimented with some really cheap equipment. So when it comes to hiking poles, I would go with something that is, reasonably light. You can buy carbon fiber hiking poles nowadays. I'm not sure. Again, it's the same thing. If you continue to buy super expensive stuff and then ignore the reasonable, kind of middle of the road purchases, all you end up doing is nobody will buy the cheap, and so then you price yourself out by always having to buy the more expensive because nobody will buy the cheap stuff because, you know, it's the market. And if you're convinced to choose more expensively, you just end up hurting yourself and others in the future when you go to purchase something that maybe is on the cheaper side. These are just cheap little aluminum poles. You set them to a height where it takes a little bit of pressure off, and you can push down to climb. You can use them for stability to keep your balance. Again, they take a little pressure off your back, pressure off your legs. They really don't make your arms sore hiking with them. So always want to have a good set of hiking poles when you're carrying a pack on you. It just helps to offload some stress from your legs. So when you get to your campsite, the first thing you should do is you should set up your shelter. That's kind of a very first principle of backpacking, is that when you get there, you set up your shelter. You don't you don't make your food, you don't take a nap, you don't relax, and then later on find out that you forgot your poles and you're sitting there in the dark trying to figure out which twigs will be the right length and trying to trim them up right. Set up your shelter first. If there's any problems with it, you have some daylight to fix it, and you can get your meal later. It'll be even more rewarding after you got all the problems figuring out your shelter, to have your meal once you feel better. Now, one of the things that I have used is a cheap little tent, and I do err on the side of experimenting with cheap stuff. It's a little hiker biker tent. It weighs 3.4 pounds, and this thing has served me well for about 5 years. When I pack my stuff up, I take my tent and a little piece of saving grace right here. It's just a 100-gallon trash bag, and I use it as a ground cloth to put under my tent in case of rain or mud, or it also works great as like a little emergency shelter if it starts raining and you're hiking. Of course, tent stakes, tent poles, and then just a really light little small tent in here. Weight is 3.4 pounds. For me, it has worked great. Some people, I think, in the past ratings of the tent said there was condensation on the inside. I've never actually had condensation at elevation above 6,000 feet, even when it was cold. So I don't, at sea level, cold, and breathing off a lot of moist, humid air in the tent overnight did produce condensation. But I'm actually a little, personally, I just have a pet peeve with the condensation complaint, because like you're out in the woods or the backcountry, you're camping, you are touching dirt constantly, you're getting into the water to get to filter your water. So why are we overly concerned about condensation on the inside of the tent, unless there's like icicles inside of it and you're gonna like poke your eye out on an icicle in the cold? I don't get the complaint or the benefit of controlling condensation to the point that you're going to spend an exorbitant amount of money on a tent. This tent was I think it was $30, maybe $35 when I bought it. I have, I think, 5 of them. Used them for the whole family, and had an extra one just in case we lost some poles or a zipper broke, because shortly after I bought them they were discontinued. So just a little note, if you continue to buy super expensive stuff and you allow others to always tell you that little things are a big deal, like condensation on the inside, they will stop making things that are less expensive, and it will drive up the price as you continue to reach out for more expensive models to have the latest and the greatest. 3.4 pounds here, 4 pounds in my pack. My water weight is going to be probably the most significant weight in my pack. I actually think if you're going to plan your hike, you should probably plan to be around water sources. You can't hike and be dehydrated. You can't sit in your tent and rest comfortably and be dehydrated. You've got to have a way to get water in you while you hike. So what I carry is a Camelback system. It's a 3-liter little bag. It has a little mouthpiece with a valve on it that you can close. The reason I have the mouthpiece out this morning because I want to show you my other way to do my water system. To filter water, I use the little mini Sawyer, and I have found it very useful, very easy to use. It is just absolutely the slickest little deal. It's way better than the pump ones. I have used the pump ones before, and this you just grab some water from your stream or your river or your lake, right out in this little pouch. Take it and you attach it through here, and then this end here goes to your clean water source. And so when you do that with the Camelback, you can just take this and run it straight up where your mouthpiece goes and run it straight into your pack from the bottom. And that way there's no handling or trying to dump it in or getting dirt in your water, trying to squirt it in, or requiring 2 people to do your water filtering. You just plug it in the bottom, squeeze this thing down, and roll it right on through, and you're just good to go. So I like that system where you can just plug it in with your at the bottom of your Camelback. And I'm sure this would work with other systems as well. And then you just put your mouthpiece in and you're good to go. So for my 3-season sleep system, I use a Climate V air pad to sleep on. Again, the reason I use it is I don't have a lot of external straps on the outside of my pack that I leave open, so it's easier for me to roll this up in a small little space. It weighs about a pound rolled up. Works good, keeps me slightly off the ground, keeps me a little warmer, even though I have slept on the ground before and I didn't think it was that big of a problem. I have 2 sleeping bags. One goes down to 50 degrees, and it's just a really small sleeping bag. And then the other one goes down to 30 degrees, and it's a Teton Sport edition. I like Teton. I have never had a problem with it. I know it's not the latest and greatest brand, but it certainly seems to work. In my upcoming hike, this one, it's rated for 40 on the outside, but goes down to 30 when you put the inner liner in it. And so that's just basically how I sleep right there. It's pretty simple. Keeps me comfortable, and I do get some good sleep out in the backcountry this way. So hope that's helpful. So the few other items that I take with me for a backpacking trip are, again, light bulbs. You've got to have a little bit of light just in case something happens, even though I'm not a big fan of wandering around in the dark or hiking at night. I like my ankles, but just a cheap little LED light and a pretty good flashlight here. Yeah, you never know. Here's some rustling in the woods. You might need your flashlight and check out what it is. I also take a little stove. Always want to check these before you go. Sometimes the igniter mechanism does not work like you're wanting it to, and you really need to just make sure that the igniter works, or you got a set of matches to work in place of the igniter. Then you got to worry about keeping your matches dry. So again, little gas canister, a little stove, and you'll be good to go. That way you can filter some water or boil some water for your backpacking meals. If you filter the water, you just want to boil it to the right temperature. If you don't filter your water, you need to boil a little bit longer to make sure any kind of bacteria that might be in it are dead. So that's what I carry with me, and it's just pretty simple, pretty cheap, you really don't have to spend a ton of money to try to outfit yourself for a backpacking trip. So next, let's talk about just what it's like to hike with some hiking partners that are different people. So when you're hiking with a group of people, you have simply got to develop a sense of awareness about your hiking party or your hiking partner. In this particular video, my wife and I hiked up to the Boulder Brook group campsite. It's a steep climb up towards Long's Peak, and it was about halfway up elevation-wise to Long's Peak. And it was really important to us that we go back home with our health and safety intact. I need to go back to work, so does my wife. Not a good idea to do something crazy. We got 2 kids counting on us for some college money. So, protecting ourselves as a resource to both ourselves and to our kids was pretty important. So the amount of elevation gain to get up to the Boulder Brook campsite was pretty significant for our conditioning level. I try to work out pretty regular. My wife works out a little less regularly than I do. And the degree of elevation climb, seeing that we are at about 700 feet of elevation above sea level in Tulsa, we probably were challenging our ability level when we climbed up to Boulder Brook. It was not a climb that was impossible to do, but it was difficult, and I want to tell you how we accomplished it. When we first started out, we started out on a pretty warm afternoon. It was in the 80s, and we hiked a pretty level path from Glacier Basin Campground to what they call Sprague Lake. When we got to Sprague Lake, we stopped. I checked my wife's vitals. I checked my own vitals. I just wanted to make sure that our hearts were not racing too much because we're used to being at 700 feet of elevation, not 9,000 or 10,000 feet. So everything seemed okay. My wife's heart rate was running a little bit high, but then we started to climb. And we started to climb understanding that we would stop and rest whenever we needed to, and that we would check in on each other. And my wife agreed to let me continue to check her vitals. So we started climbing up, and I have to tell you that there were some steep points in the climb that we just had to stop and we had to rest. And my wife had to rest a little bit more frequently than myself initially. And I was very intentional about her actually stopping to take a break. So as we started the hike, I probably was a little bit more protective of my wife as we were exerting ourselves going up towards the Boulder Brook group site. But as things progressed, it just became much more of a natural sort of check-in. If I saw my wife kind of needing to stop or breathing a little hard and she was slowing, we just stopped, and that's where I took pictures or took video. And of course we always rested when there was a good place for a good picture or a good video. But it was a lot of pausing and stopping and checking in with each other. And the bigger your group, you just need to develop an awareness. I think there is a need for there to be kind of a leader or a point person in this regard when you do a group hike or even a partner hike, that you are checking in with every person. And you don't want to you really don't want to be on a group hike if you have an individual who definitely wants to achieve a goal of getting somewhere, and that is the only way to do that. You have to get there by this time. that's a recipe for someone to really not enjoy the hike. Um, and that's just, it's not an attitude that's going to help you thrive in your hike. You have to be able to check in with people. You have to be able to account for things that come up on the hike. Someone can sprain an ankle. Someone could, just need to rest longer. In the case with my nephew coming up here for my next hike, he could have a blood sugar drop, and that will be the biggest concern that we'll have is, will his blood sugar drop when we're hiking? Will it drop at night when he's recovering from the hike? So those are all important things to take into account, and that is really an illustration of the need to hike kind of as a group. It is not survival of the fittest. That's a horrible way to consider achieving any goal. It's a horrible social theory. It's a horrible way to get along with people that you are in a group with. Survival of the fittest. That just is not what it is to hike in a group. Hiking in a group is taking care of your hiking partners, checking in on them, making sure everybody's okay. If you have a lot of energy, that's great. That's your time to maybe take some photos, do some side hikes, off the trail. Just kind of look around a little bit, but don't be treating other people like they're just not good enough to hike with you. That is not cool. Go do a solo hike if that's how you feel, and don't arrange a group hike with people that you want to try to guilt into hiking faster or hiking further or getting where you want to be on time. That just isn't going to work. Let me remind you to take a little break, enjoy where you're at in the backcountry, enjoy nature, stop and enjoy the little stops along the way, take some pictures and take some video. The rest of the video is going to be all those little stops. And then I'll show you a brief little section where we set up our camp. So we got up in the morning and enjoyed a little bit of coffee, a little bit of a breakfast with a protein bar, and we hiked back down the mountain. And let me tell you, it sure was a whole lot easier getting back down than it was coming up. Thanks for watching another episode of Eric's Camping Adventures. Hope you enjoyed the video, and come back and watch some more.